Hello colleagues, welcome to our EPO 2022 Extended ECHO Session. My name is Francis Ochen from the African Society for Laboratory Medicine, and I'm glad to be your moderator today. Our session today will run for 1 hour, and we will take presentations first and then get to a question and answer discussion. Please join our discussion through the chat room and ask questions, make comments and reservations if there are any, and we'll be dealing with that after the presentations. We do have translation services, and please keep to one of either English or French channels. Please stay away from the off channel for you to get all the services. We know that the continent joined the world in commemorating the World TB Day on 24th March 2022, and different players in the TB control and elimination space undertook and continue to undertake different activities to strengthen control and elimination efforts. As a society, in commemoration of this significant day, we have dedicated 3 sessions on TB diagnostics, and these 3 sessions will be running from April through May 2022. And this is the first of the 3. Tuberculosis control and elimination initiatives were impacted by COVID-19, and the impact still continues to be felt. From sudden repurposing of testing platforms, leading to delay in sample processing in some cases, and stigma that kept some of the potential cases away from seeking services, given, of course, the control measures that were associated with COVID, isolation, quarantine, and travel restrictions. And so diagnostic and care services therefore needs to be revamped, re-strategized, repurposed to be able to respond to some of the challenges that were brought by COVID. And so to recover from this lost ground, new approaches are needed, including efficient sample transport, the need for alternative sample types, and then optimization of diagnostic networks, and systematic integration of testing, not haphazard. We also know that WHO has guidelines for high volume and near patient platforms to expand diagnostic tools. And so we know that in today's session, we'll look at the deployment of some of these new capabilities and testing options to strategically complement the existing near patient capabilities. And so to take us through the session, we have 3 distinguished speakers. Our first speaker will be Mehan Barathlall, and he is a marketing lead of the molecular solutions at Roche Diagnostics based in South Africa. Mehan holds a bachelor's degree in sports science and a master's in business administration from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He has experience in medical industry, having worked in both sales and marketing in pharmaceutical, medical devices, and now diagnostics. Mehan will be supported in the second presentation by Edwin Muiruri, and Edwin is a product manager for TB and hepatitis at Roche Diagnostics, and he's based in Nairobi. And finally, our third presenter will be Professor Matilu Mwau. Professor is a professor of infectious diseases. He is a senior principal clinical research scientist and the deputy director at the Kenya Medical Research Institute. His training includes medicine from the University of Nairobi, tropical medicine from Nagasaki University, and clinical medicine with a bias in immunology from the Oxford University. In his university position, he mentors and supervises PhD and graduate students, and he's done a number of these for many students. Outside science and corporate governance, he is actively involved in renewable energy, hospitality, and farming. He will be dealing with deployment within programs when we look at the options available. And colleagues, allow me note at this point that We will be presenting this from Roche, but that does not mean that ASLM endorses any manufacturer. We are just presenting and sharing key facts around diagnostics. With this, allow me to hand you over to our presenters, and we'll be starting with Mehan. Mehan, over to you.
Many thanks, Francis. Thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction of also setting the scene so perfectly well for us. As Francis said, my name is Mehan. I'm the marketing lead at Roche Diagnostics. I'll be joined with my colleague Edwin Muiruri today. And we'd like to discuss with you a topic that is very important, as Francis alluded to. It's the role of the network associations in terms of achieving our goals of 95-90 for MTB disease elimination, with a focus on scaling up testing. So like Francis said, COVID-19 has affected so many of the healthcare programs, and none more so than the TB elimination program, by compounding already big challenges that we face in the network laboratory networks. So how do we meet this goal of global eradication target that we set up? Well, we think there's new approaches are needed. And as he alluded to, one of them would be efficient sample transport. The second one would probably be alternative sample types. And then, of course, the optimization of diagnostic networks and integration of testing. So collectively, these new alternative ways of looking what we see as ways of how can we get to the elimination. Second slide, if we look at it from a numbers point of view, you'll see that tuberculosis is still the second most infectious killer in the world, with more than 1.5 million deaths per year. We're still seeing a decrease in the case notifications. As of today alone, we've seen the 30% reduction in terms of notification, which amounts to, in today's number, almost 3 million undiagnosed cases that are basically walking around and helping us, spread this infectious disease. So again, I say to you, in a program that was already on a back foot to start with, COVID-19 has impacted significantly. So it lends to the point that we need to now not only catch up, but how do we get to a higher volume of testing, right, to make up for the losses that we've had with COVID-19? If you go to the next slide, you'll see the impact that it's had on the TB services, where we understand a lot of programs lost their resources where they were diverted to COVID-19. But in TB, this has resulted in almost 7 out of 10 patients being affected in terms of getting access to their treatment. All of these numbers collectively added up to almost a 40% fall in diagnosis within Asia and Africa. So again, I say there's a huge number of patients that we have now lost within this COVID-19 that we need to make up and get back to screening and testing. If you turn to the next slide, Edwin, we already know that diagnosing of TB is not an easy one. It's not a single test. It's a multifaceted and complex diagnostic process. To add to this, the current sampling type we know is a challenge where patients are finding it difficult for sample collection. So again, what is needed? We need to continue evaluating alternative sample types. We need to get to our goal of getting more patients with easier sample collection, easier sample transport, and easier sample processing. If you go to the next slide, Edwin, you'll see again, with regards to the global as alluded to Francis, WHO is also supporting the scale up, not just for treatment algorithms, but also for diagnostic products. And to reemphasize the 3 key pillars that we think are necessary for us to eradicate and eliminate this disease, you'll know that number 1 will probably be cross-program testing, whereby we can make the program more resilient to disruptions. Secondly, to invest in alternative sample types to reach more people. Thirdly, how do we maximize the installed base that already exists in these high volume, in urban areas that already cater for high volume testing? So these are 3 key pillars in addition to the next slide. And the next slide, yeah. In addition to the WHO handbook, which has been updated to add to this now, new products that are now for medium to high volume testing. And is again, as I say, recommended by the WHO. One of these key products is the corbus MTB. And to take you into a little more detail about this product and the offering, I'd like to hand over to my friend and colleague, Edwin Muiruri.
Thank you, Mehan. So considering the impact of COVID-19 that my colleague Mehan has just talked about, and the lessons that we learn from the response to COVID-19, we can all agree that there is an opportunity to rethink some testing aspects for TB. The new assays that are provided in the WHO guidelines, which Mehan has talked about as well, provide more tools to look at a testing continuum which supports diagnostic network optimization activities with which are at the end of it all going to improve program efficiency. So we are talking a testing continuum which programs can leverage from near patient testing all the way to the high volume and medium throughput solutions and anything else that would come in between. So this can really help bring molecular diagnosis closer to the culture labs, especially in the urban and the peri-urban settings, which tend to have more of the traditional microbiology labs for drug resistance testing. There are also opportunities to leverage existing sample transport mechanisms, which are already in place, which capture efficiency and help to strengthen networks. And the settings as well that have, for example, larger populations can also benefit from this continuum by being able to access efficient service delivery, as well as benefiting from the added capacity and potential cost savings. So looking at this continuum in another way, you can see that there is an opportunity to scale up testing by leveraging multiple partners. And these multiple partners include the players in POC, those ones near the patient, and those ones in the urban and the peri-urban areas. So this will help create program dynamics with broader diagnostic options and flexibility. For example, you can shift and adjust as needed, with a possibility to relocate samples when there is maybe issues to do with supply chains or even spikes in demand. And this would ensure continuity for all patients and programs. And this is similar to what is being done, for example, in HIV and viral load and EID programs. So as Roche, how have we responded to this? We have responded by optimizing diagnosis by providing 3 tests. We have the corbus MTB test. This is a dual target test with a smear negative sensitivity of 86.6%. We also have the corbus RIF and INH test, which by this I mean is a combined test for RIF and INH, and it is offered as a reflex to the corbus MTB test. We also have the corbus MY test. This is for the detection of the pulmonary non-tuberculosis mycobacterial disease. And all these tests are available globally. However, the corbus MY may not be a focus for Africa at the moment. We have also responded by offering flexibility with the type of samples that the labs can use. So our test allows 3 sample types. There's raw sputum, there's sputum sediments, and the bronchoalveolar lavage sediments. You acknowledge that there is a need for alternative sample types, and we want to say at this point that we support these initiatives and are also working towards this. So in addition to the assay and the sample types, we have a workflow that enables the lab to get 2 results from 1 patient sample. So 1 sample is collected. It is treated to chemical liquefaction and inactivation using the corbus microbial inactivation solution. The same sample is taken through 1 sonication cycle. And then at the end of the analytical process, you're able to get 2 results for MTB, as well as the results for resistance. So this results to differential diagnosis that enables clinicians to make their decisions easily and very fast. So for example, if a patient shows up and you do a corbus MTB test and they turn out positive, immediately they reflect into the resistance training without the person at the lab requiring a different sample or requiring to restart the whole diagnosis process. So you may ask why we have integrated RIF and INH. And the reason we have done this is because of the clinical and then epidemiological value that this provides. So clinically, this enables fast and informed decision making. And epidemiologically, it allows for accurate surveillance of resistance. Currently, global surveillance of resistance is based on reef resistance, yet HRTB is more prevalent than reef resistance alone. There is therefore a need for countries to move towards universal testing of both reef and INH resistance at the start of treatment. So from our tests, you need no extra sample. You run again on the same sample, as I said, and then we charge a cost of $9.9 US. So this includes the cost of the corbus MTB, the corbus reef INH, the reagents and consumables that are included there, as well as the sonication that I had talked about earlier. So if you look at this slide here, this is a snapshot of the smear negative sensitivity of the various players in both urban and the near patient settings, as well as the limit of detection. You can see that we have a very good performance in both. And this can be linked to the fact that one, our test is a dual target test. And secondly, is that we have included sonication in the workflow. So in general, dual target tests typically have approximately 85% smear negative sensitivity. And studies have also demonstrated that sonication improves smear negative sensitivity. I would like to say that also the sensitivity of TB tests depends really on the sample population. So these numbers should be taken as a single point of data. And also that there has been no head-to-head studies done between any of these tests. So please take these numbers for information purposes only. And in addition to the data that we have just reviewed from our IFUs, we also have been through several peer-reviewed publications that assess the performance of our assay. The first one is a study led by FIND, which looked at the performance across 4 assays with Roche, showing similar or lower limit of detection for MTB compared to the expert MTB reef. The second study was conducted in South Africa, and it looked at the performance of the assay in a high burden HIV setting, and it demonstrated that corbus MTB was sensitive and unaffected by HIV co-infection. The third one looked at samples from Germany and Sierra Leone, and it found accurate detection of MTB and resistance associated mutations for corbus MTB. So in order to help improve the network optimization that we are talking about and creation of a testing continuum, we have introduced a system that we're calling corbus 5800, and this was launched in November of last year. So this is a small system that expands the reach for integration and full automation into the lower and medium throughput settings, such as hubs. It has a very compact footprint and can do between 20 to 150 samples in a day. It has a broad menu of more than 25 assays, thus allowing for integrated testing, and it can also run up to 6 different assays in a single run. So this is in addition to the corbus 68 and 8800 systems that we have, which are suited for the high throughput labs. And if you take a closer look, our solutions and value add support integrated testing with an end-to-end approach in mind. So this can start from sample collection, where we have continued to make investments in, for example, the plasma separation cards, which enable patients in the rural areas to get HIV results via dried plasma samples. We are currently working on and supporting studies for self-collection kits for HPV and alternative sample types such as oral swabs for MTB. In terms of systems, we have a broad assay as well, and all this can be customizable for specific labs based on their workload and the level of integration in that specific lab. So the broad assay menu can allow a lab with one system to run 2 or more tests based on their needs. So you can probably combine HIV and tuberculosis, you can combine tuberculosis and hepatitis or any other combination that you want in any of our systems. And at the patient end, we have the digital tools such as Temba, which can dramatically improve time to results, delivery, and encourage treatment adherence for patients. So overall, we continue to support capacity building activities that support the lab and the diagnostic ecosystem as a key component of resilient healthcare. So from a Roche perspective, we are fully aligned and support the eradication efforts across the high burden infectious diseases in Africa, and this includes TB. We have extensive experience across Africa with decades of partnership with the HIV viral load and DID labs. At the moment, we have over 450 representatives across sub-Saharan Africa, and this includes the application specialists, medical and scientific affairs, as well as healthcare consultants. And all these people have a focus of finding solutions to complex problems with an end-to-end approach. So we would love to work with the TB programs to support network optimization for TB. And this is by building upon the current approaches in a complementary way to bring scale and reach. We can help reduce the risk in TB programs by looking at a testing continuum and providing more options within the existing systems. We can support patients' disease management with the digital tools, with training and capacity building activities, and in the end, work in partnership with you to further strengthen and sustain TB programs and drive towards TB eradication. So beyond the performance of our MTB assay, we also believe that there is a need to address other challenges in the patient journey. And this is by partnering from one end to the end in order to support sustainable programs and build local capacity. And this is an approach that we take within our Global Access Program, which includes support for other programs like HIV and cervical cancer and all other high burden diseases. And this is how we are approaching the support towards the TB program. So looking at the needs within a country, within a specific program, within a specific context, and tailoring solutions along the journey that is unique in each patient setting. So this can include support to build awareness for programs, to tackle issues like stigma and misinformation, support to improve on sample collections, or even consider it in terms of integration within the existing systems. Building laboratory capacity in terms of workflow, training efforts, and supply chain management. We also look at ways to support in terms of building capacities for healthcare providers and linking this with result return mechanisms to ensure timely clinical decision-making and improvement on disease management. So finally, we believe that when taken together, the impact of the new diagnostic tools, the program dynamics considering a multiple partner approach and an end-to-end solutions approach along the patient journey can help bring about high impact programs that can support eradication efforts. So from a diagnostic perspective, it starts with continued efforts to optimize networks, consider the testing continuum that we talked about from POC near patient all the way to the high volume testing, continuing to invest in studies to support alternative sample types to reach more patients, doing multi-drug resistance testing for all TB positive patients, leveraging on new innovations to ensure results are acted upon in a timely manner and patients adhere to treatment, such as via the digital apps, and ultimately keeping more people healthy for a strong economy that benefits all. Thank you very much. And at this point, I will invite Professor Matilu Mwau.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matilu Mwau. I work for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, and I'm happy to be here and I'm happy that I'm speaking about tuberculosis. As you may know, in our part of the world, HIV, TB, HPV, and hepatitis have been leading causes of mortality. My colleagues before me have spoken about this already. And we run laboratories. I'm an infectious disease guy, so I'm a medical doctor, a molecular diagnostics person. And our labs have spent significant time for more than 10 or 15 years just looking at HIV, and then later on looking at HPV, hepatitis, and most recently SARS-CoV-2. And we have had significant impact there. But about 2 years ago, I was having conversations with program people in the health space, and they posed a question that I found quite intriguing. And they said, so now that you have this infrastructure and boots on the ground doing molecular diagnostics, and you know the TB, ideas are changing, and there are different approaches now to TB. What are your thoughts about TB diagnostics at the reference level? And I couldn't answer the question at that time because I thought about the technologies available, and I thought about what it is that we do. And I decided, let me go and think about TB and let me pay some attention to TB. And now, only very recently did I discover that, in fact, the intentions around TB in the future by 2035 are very ambitious. And therefore, you cannot help but think that the technologies that we have at the reference level must be useful. And in this slide, I've put in just one of the technologies that we have at the reference level, the Roche C8800, which, as my colleagues before me have said, has the capability to test for very many organisms that are of interest to us in Africa and in sub-Saharan Africa. And for us, we've been using this for HIV, we've been using for hepatitis, we've been using for HPV and SARS-CoV-2, and we're able to repurpose, like in 2020, very quickly, to be able to conduct our normal testing and then also to take care of the coronavirus pandemic. And so we think that these sorts of technologies present significant opportunities for TB testing. We know how the landscape looks like for TB now, and we know that one of the things that must really be brought into play is diversification of testing for TB. In my country, for instance, we used to do, commonly used to do smears for TB, and then we moved on to GeneXpert, which is found in certain health facilities, not all of them, just some of them, and we could say call it a near patient kind of technology. But we didn't really get to a point where culturing TB became a standard available for everybody, for the reasons that you know is a complicated exercise, and also the fact that it's also a bit hazardous for the ordinary people doing it out there in the periphery. So it must remain a fairly sophisticated test. Okay, so we know that the technologies that we have should be brought onto the table when we are looking at TB at the reference level, and they would help provide resilience and flexibility, because the capacity to test in the periphery is still limited, and also things happen out there in the periphery, including supply chains being disrupted, and therefore there being no reagents to test at the periphery. So the technologies we have in the reference level should be able to provide this flexibility. Okay, what we don't know is whether they would provide an efficient way of looking at TB at the diagnostic level, and whether the costs involved would differ significantly, either in a negative or in the positive sense, when compared with the tests involved, the costs of the tests involved right now, and overall whether bringing these technologies into play would enhance delivery. Right? I want to give you an example of what happens in a certain facility where I was just yesterday, and this is in Western Kenya. So in Western Kenya, there is a county called Busia County. The Busia County is in the west near Lake Victoria, and there are 4 GeneXpert platforms, approximately 4 or so, that are available for TB testing. Very recently, just about 2 years ago, we began to be interested in those technologies because they're also capable of HIV testing. And what happens is that specimens are collected at health facilities in a spoke and hub model, or hub and spoke model, and then they are transported to those 4 facilities so that they can be tested. When the tests are conducted, the results are returned to the health centers, and then the patients come for those results. And also, because the doctors have the results, when the patients come, the doctors are able to manage them. You may be aware that when we are looking at HIV in the same way, samples are collected in a similar manner, spoke and hub model. But when the tests are conducted at the hub, the results are not transmitted physically to the health centers. They are transmitted electronically, and even the clients, the patients, are informed electronically to come for their results, because most people, or the people, have mobile telephones, and that has sort of improved efficiency and reduced lost follow-up. And this is the kind of thinking that one would want to think when you're looking at tuberculosis. I've drawn a map of Kenya, just the southern half of Kenya, because the most populated part of the country. This is also where you are likely to find TB. And what you may not see here is that along the southern part of Kenya, there are big cities: Mombasa, Nairobi, Nakuru, Eldoret, Kisumu, and Busia. I like to assume that Busia is a big city, and also Kericho. There are at least, the last I checked, at least 10 high-volume HIV testing facilities in the country along that line that have got the capacity to test for infectious agents that also include TB. But in terms of something like GeneXpert, there are many more facilities in a sub-county and county level, and that kind of level has got GeneXpert. The capacity of GeneXpert is limited to a certain extent, whereas for the high-volume HIV testing facilities, the capacity to test even for TB is not that limited. So what are our thoughts in a nutshell? The first thing is that if we decided to test for TB in the reference laboratories, what would that affect turnaround time to result, and therefore would it have a benefit to patient management? Okay, and the question for us is, what is the current turnaround time at the moment in the facilities that are conducting these tests in the spoke and hub model? And if we begin this, what will be our turnaround time with, and therefore what is the difference? Okay, and then you may know that GeneXpert has some capacity to determine resistance. But if you look at the technologies we have in the reference level, especially for corbus, corbus is quite capable of looking at rifampicin and isoniazid resistance as a standard. Okay, two questions. One, how often are we going to find this resistance to isoniazid or to rifampicin as monoresistance, and how often are we going to find multi-drug resistance TB in our population in Western Kenya and Busia, or in the whole country of Kenya, or in sub-Saharan Africa? These are curiosities that we need to address, because I noticed that every year around 580,000 people are said to have a drug resistance to TB. Is that even true? I would like to know for our country. So if we decide to implement TB testing at the reference level, what are the cost implications? Will we save money? Will we overburden the healthcare, which is already suffering from coronavirus testing? What is going to happen? And so what is the real cost of the two TB testing scenarios at the moment? We want to know. And then the other thing is that because these are not technologies that are idle, they're already being used for HIV, they're being used for the coronavirus testing, and also in some situations now, we're using these technologies for HPV testing. What will happen if we bring TB into play? Are we going to affect the workflow, or how will you optimize the workflow so that we do not disrupt what is already ongoing? Will that have an impact on turnaround times for HIV and for other tests? Will we contaminate results? We want to know this. So in 2020, we put together a proposal to look at the how to optimize the technologies we have that are being used to test for other things, so that they could test for tuberculosis using the Roche platform. Okay, and the first thing we are looking at is the workflow, the best workflow that we can use with the existing infrastructure, understanding the staffing requirements, and then the volume potential, so that when we give out a report, it has impact in terms of volume. What are we going to have in terms of volume? And can people go out there and say, this is the time to scale up testing in Kenya because the capacity in this environment is this and that? We want to know that. And then in terms of costing, we want to calculate the costs per test, and then to put that on the table when we are negotiating, okay? And the third thing is to collect data on the various resistances to TB, isoniazid, rifampicin, and multi-drug resistance. And because we are going to do this study in the Busia population, we are probably going to extrapolate it to elsewhere, especially for around 10 counties out of the 47 in Kenya that have, epidemiologists that appear like those of Busia. Okay, so ultimately we are interested in optimizing resources to address the current healthcare needs, and we think that the needs will even become more and more as we go along. We hope nothing else happens outside of COVID. We hope to be able to handle TB, but we want to optimize the resources we have before we reach out and say, this is not enough, we need more. Our systems are quite high volume, and they can test for many pathogens as you've heard. And it's not just the Roche platforms that we have, but I'm addressing this because from the Roche perspective, because this is a study that we are currently about to launch and start conducting, okay? And we also are very keen to improve resilience so that when health threats come into play, we are capable of addressing them, okay? It's one thing to talk about accuracy or sensitivity and specificity, and the data has been presented just before my presentation, speaking about the sensitivity and specificity and predictive values for the Roche technology. It's one thing to talk about accuracy of the technology, but it's another thing altogether to implement and to see that it actually helps despite being accurate, okay? Many times we have seen very good technologies, very accurate, that have really not played a big role in terms of making a difference at the implementation level. So as scientists, we can't just go into the bench science alone. We're interested in implementation sciences, okay? What are we looking for? We're looking for about 2,000 samples, raw sputums. We are not going to do bronchial lavages for obvious reasons. Busia is a small city, not a big one. So you don't want to do a bronchial lavage just like that. And the environment allows us to collect up to 600 samples per month, but we are looking for at least a minimum of 100 positive samples so that we can make some, inferences, okay? The current prevalence of TB in that population is somewhere below 5%. We think that if we start in April 2022, within 6 months, we could have the data that we require to make informed opinions about workflow, about costing, and about resistances as they may emerge. This is all I have for you at the moment. We hope that we'll have completed the study by around October, November this year, and then we'll probably be able to share in a session such as this, the findings and whether this can help improve resilience in terms of taking care of the next big surprises as they continue to emerge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mwau, Edwin, and Mehan. Very informative presentations with questions that we have to answer from the study that is running in Kenya, but also studies that should then be running elsewhere. Colleagues, we've got to know the available platforms that are making their way to the market. We have also got to know some of the considerations we need to make when getting some of this in our settings, be it your laboratory or your country. We are now getting to the questions and answer session, and I will encourage that you continue getting those questions, comments coming through so that we can deal with them. And I will take the first set of questions, and in no order of preference, but just to start it off, the first question is coming from Faiz, and Faiz is asking, this has come multiple times, the turnaround time for your test, what is it for the two results to come out? But you can also add to the sonication process. Is that a separate process? And if yes, what is also the turnaround time for that particular process? And I can have Edwin take this.
Thank you very much for the question. So because our platforms work by batching, for example, if you're using the 68 or the 8800, you would get 94 results in the first 90 minutes. And then in terms of sonication, for sonication, our sonicator can do up to 5 samples at a go. And yeah, so you definitely have to batch before you put them into the system.
And thanks, Edwin. Maybe
go
just to add to that, sorry, Edwin. I think that the pre-analytic step with the sonicator, including the addition of the MIS, which is the inactivation solution, it's about 8 minutes. And that's for 5 samples. And I think then you can load on the system. Well, ideally you would want to load 96 samples on the 6800. We also have the 5800, which would allow you to do as little as 20 samples with the same turnaround time, just to clarify. So it's difficult to say what it would really be in the real world, because it depends on the lab, it depends on which system you have and how we would set up the workflow, but that's roughly the numbers.
Thank you, Johnny, for stepping in. And now that you've brought in the MIS solution, please just continue from there and tell us if the inactivation does the inactivation from for MTB as well, or it is only for the other microorganisms that might be in the sample.
Yes, Edwin, did you want to take this one, or do you want me to answer?
Go ahead, Johnny, please.
Yeah, so the inactivation solution is for TB. It's to inactivate everything that's in the sample for then it to go into the sonication. It also helps to kind of start to open up or break down the walls, the cell walls, so that you can really, with the sonicator, have great access into the DNA for the PCR later. So it's kind of a combination of both activities.
Thank you. We have a question coming from Innocent, and I think Aile and a few other colleagues, and it is on waste management. And so we know that most molecular platforms tend to come with chemicals that may require incineration for their final disposal. What is your take on the reagents that we use on the 2 platforms that you've shared with us? And would they require incineration for their final disposal?
Yeah, thank you, Francis. This is a great question. Actually, I'm not sure. Maybe I can answer this in 2 ways. One, we've been working very closely in a partnership with the CDC International Laboratory Branch and also ASLM. I think about a month ago, we had rolled out a tool called the Waste Cost Analysis Framework. It was based on the waste that's produced for the viral load labs. And this was to really understand how we can quantify the exact amount of waste that's created, as well as what it would actually cost to properly dispose of this waste, considering all of the things, the PPE, the samples, everything, not just what's coming off the instruments themselves. So I think now this is also an interesting question we raise for TB, and this is something that we would be obviously interested in further investigating. But yes, on the Roche systems, we do use guanidinium thiocyanate as part of our lysis buffer for the assays. So in the liquid waste, you would have trace amounts of the guanidinium thiocyanate. If people need additional details of what's in the waste, we can always provide this. We've done the calculations and we can support the detailed information. You also have to consider, besides the liquid waste, you're also producing solid waste with the tips and the plastic plates. So you would also need to think about how those are disposed of, which is also based on local regulations. So we can't specifically say this is what you should do, but I think it's clear that we can give you all the information of what's in the waste to help guide those decisions locally.
Thank you, Johnny. I'll take this set from Pam, and Pam is asking, and I'll get to Professor at some point with a few questions as well, but what are the initiatives from Roche around point of care testing for TB? Do we have any initiatives coming up?
Mehan, do you want to take this one, or Edwin?
Yeah, I can take it. Thank you for that. At the moment, what we are looking at is, for example, not very point of care is what we have with the 5800, which is working near the patient, but in the medium level, not very near the patient. So at the moment, we don't have something concrete for that. But as we said in our presentation, we have a lot that is working, the progress. So at the moment, we don't have something, but we do have work in progress towards that.
Thank you. The next question is coming from Philip, and Philip, together with Ernest, are asking something similar. Is it possible to replace current platforms with the new ones, given your strategies, your business strategies? And to add to this, what is the benefit of the C5800 beyond the 6800 and the 8800, if you could deal with the two questions together? This was directed to you, Edwin, but anyone can take it.
Francis, maybe I could start, Edwin, with the 5800 and the benefits.
Perfect.
Yeah. So as Prof alluded to earlier in his presentation, we've had a solution called the 8800, which is a high volume testing platform. We also had a 6800 high volume multi-disease testing platform. So in creating a 5800, what we've done is created a solution that can give you the same benefits of a 8800, but on a smaller footprint. So for labs that don't have the same high throughputs that we have with these big HIV and HIV labs, we can give you a multi-disease testing platform, but on a smaller platform. Again, even for the size of the lab, the 5800 will allow you to give you the optimization of a fully high volume lab with the same benefits at that size. So it gives you basically everything that you would have got on the Rolls-Royce, which is the 8800, on a very much smaller platform. I hope that answers your question on the benefits.
It does. Edwin, are you adding something to this?
Yes, I will add and say that on the existing platforms, if you want to run TB, you do not have to replace the systems. That is why we are talking about integrated testing. So if you have a platform that is, for example, the 6800 and it is doing HIV, you can come on and add MTB onto it. There is no need to add a new system or to remove it and replace it with a new one. But if you have, for example, the older systems like the CAP-CTMs, those ones we are working towards phasing them out and replacing them with a corbus 5800.
Okay, thank you. Let me get one for Professor Mwau. And this relates to one comment that you made on the fact that manufacturers can have very accurate platforms or methods that are generated and sent out there. But the environment of implementation might actually impact on the validity of test results that we get. And from the Kenyan experience, I know you're doing further studies, but when the platform was introduced in your facility, the expectation is that you did your verification studies. How was it comparing with what the manufacturer is claiming?
Okay, first of all, First of all, I would like to say without fear of contradiction that these are very accurate technologies, okay? So we have no issues around sensitivity and specificity. But usually what scientists like myself have a problem with, where we are weak as scientists, is that we like to imagine that all activities happen in the laboratory. We usually forget that the laboratory is just one cog in the wheel, so that even the way the sample is collected out there, the transportation mechanisms and the environment and so on can affect ultimately the result that you are going to give to the patient, okay? So this is the importance of having implementation sciences kind of thinking, where you have the accurate test, but when you implement it, will it give you the findings that it is giving you in the laboratory? And this is even can be drilled down further to predictive values. So like now, if you look like at coronavirus right now, the prevalence at the moment is, or incidence is little. It's not as much as it was in December. If you had a very accurate test in December, it would predict positively and well for many people. But if you use that test right now, when the coronavirus is so little, you have a problem now. TB is not as common as corona. So if you have a very accurate test out there, what will be in the lab, where you have samples that are well defined, what will be its a predictive value when you begin using it in a population where only 2.5% of the people are positive for TB. These are things that we must be interested in, and therefore these are things that we want to look at. But in the lab, these technologies are quite accurate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insights on that. My next question is going to the Roche team, and anyone can take this. So, looking at the target genes and how many can be detected for RIF resistance and INH, what are the target genes for your platform, and how many is it designed to detect for monoresistance and multi-drug resistance? And you can add to the question of interference from Chibuke as well. There are some particles or objects or items that are determined to be interfering, if any, with your test processes that might interfere with the results, the quality of the results that you get. I hope the questions are clear.
Thanks. So in terms of the genes for the RIF and INH, we are able to detect rifampicin resistance associated mutations on the RPOB gene, and for isoniazid resistance mutations are detected in a CATG and INHA genes. And then for probably in terms of interference, I do not have any data at the moment, but then as we said, this is work that is continuing. Some things we will learn as we go on, unless maybe Johnny has something to add on that.
Yes, usually within our instructions for use, we have a detailed tables that will show what studies we've done in terms of interference. So I don't have it memorized off the top of my head. It's usually quite a long list, but we can pull that out of the IFU. The IFUs are also publicly available. You can Google them.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And I think the last question, we have so many questions coming through, but I think the last question is operational, and it's coming from Sam. And Sam is asking, when will you phase out the CAP-CTM 48 and 96? Is that going to be phased out? And if yes, what's the timeline?
But just to answer that question.
Sorry, man, I already put it in the chat.
Oh, you got it in. Thanks,
I put it in the chat.
Okay, so thank you. But you can raise it for the interest of others, right?
Sure. So our CAP-CTM systems are at end of life in Q1 2024. So we're in our last 2 years, let's say, of the CAP-CTMs. So right now the transition is depending on the lab and depending on the circumstance, which we can consult with you. It's a transition to either the corbus 6800 or 8800, depending on the lab and how many systems are there, or it can be to 4800 or to 5800 systems. We have plenty of options, and we can consult with you on what best platform it is for transition.
Thank you very much, Tim. And colleagues, we are about 4 minutes from the top of the hour. We'll start the wrap up. We have taken ourselves through the new technologies that are coming to the market, but also experience from Kenya with Professor Mwau, who has handled the platform for other conditions, but now bringing in TB. We know that other countries may be having the same, and your sharing of experiences through some of these platforms is quite key. Now, as we wrap up, can I ask Professor Mwau to give us your closing remarks in 15 seconds?
Thank you very much. I'm rather hoping that in the new TB strategy, one of the interests will be to test large numbers of people who might have TB, aggressive identification and putting on treatment. And I'm rather hoping that the technologies that we have can provide that confidence that you can go out aggressively and look for those who have TB. And I'm hoping that our study, when we are done, will provide the evidence that is required to support this kind of approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mwau. Mehan, your closing comments.
Thank you, Francis. So for me, I think the closing will be, in order for us to meet our global eradication goals, and more especially to make up what we've lost from COVID, we'd have to look at the new approaches that are needed. Efficient sample transport, new alternate sample types, and optimization of diagnostic networks and integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehan. And I will give it back to Edwin. Please, your closing remarks in 10 seconds.
Yes, thank you very much, Francis. For me, it would be a call to action. Let us look at some of these new proposals like a testing continuum and integrated testing and multi-disease platforms that would enable all of us to reach the target that we are looking at, which is TB eradication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Colleagues, Johnny, you're in the background. Please do your closing remarks. We have 10 seconds for you as well.
Nothing further from me. I think it's been very well summed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So colleagues, we're coming to the close of our session for today. My colleagues have put in the chat the links to the ASLM Academy for those who may need certificates to demonstrate that you spent the last 1 hour with us, and thank you very much for spending the last 1 hour with us. We hope that the discussions from this session was beneficial to you as an individual, but also your institution that you represent, and you can begin making considerations for optimizing your testing network. The slides will be available on our website, and the recording tool will be available for those who may want to make further reference to today's session. And we will make this available as soon as we can in the next 2 or 3 days. Thank you again for joining us. And from me, I can give you back the 2 remaining minutes until our next session. Goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day.